The story of German DNA begins thousands of years ago, shaped by migrations, survival, and adaptation. To truly understand what makes it unique, we need to look back at the earliest foundations of its genetic makeup, long before the rise of kingdoms and empires. Before even the first cities emerged, three distinct ancestral groups laid the groundwork for modern German DNA. Each of these groups carried unique traits, traditions, and ways of life that would eventually merge to form the genetic identity of the German people. The first of these groups were the Western hunter-gatherers. These were some of the earliest inhabitants of Europe, roaming the vast forests and plains of what is now Germany over 10,000 years ago. They were skilled survivors, hunting game, fishing in rivers, and foraging for food. Their DNA carried the signatures of adaptation to harsh environments, allowing them to thrive in cold climates with minimal sunlight. One of their most distinctive traits was their appearance. Genetic studies suggest that they had dark skin and striking blue eyes, a combination that was once common across prehistoric Europe. These hunter-gatherers left a lasting genetic imprint, particularly in the northern regions of Germany, where traces of their DNA remain more prominent to this day. Then, around 7,000 years ago, a dramatic transformation took place. A new group of people arrived from Anatolia, in what is now modern-day Turkey. These were the Neolithic farmers, who brought with them a completely different way of life. Unlike the hunter-gatherers who lived in small, mobile bands, these farmers built permanent settlements, cultivated crops like wheat and barley, and raised livestock. With their arrival, agriculture spread across Germany, replacing the old ways of life. The genetic influence of these Anatolian farmers introduced new traits, including lighter skin and darker hair. Their DNA remains strongest in the southern regions of Germany, such as Bavaria, where their legacy of farming and settlement is still evident in cultural traditions that date back thousands of years. But the biggest genetic shift came about 5,000 years ago, when a third group swept into Europe from the vast grasslands of the Pontic-Caspian steppe. These were the Indo-European Pastoralists, often linked to the Yemnaya culture. With their mastery of horseback riding and their warrior culture, they spread rapidly across the continent, bringing not only their technology and customs but also their DNA. They introduced the ability to digest milk into adulthood, a trait that is now widespread among Germans and other Northern Europeans. Their genetic contribution also brought changes in physical traits, with a higher frequency of taller stature and lighter hair and eye colors. Most significantly, the Yemnaya people introduced the R1b haplogroup, which remains one of the dominant Y-DNA markers in Germany today. These three groups, the Western hunter-gatherers, the Anatolian Neolithic farmers, and the Indo-European Steppe Pastoralists, did not simply replace one another. Instead, they blended over time, forming the foundation of German DNA. The result is a genetic legacy that carries elements of all three, with Northern Germans tending to have a higher proportion of hunter-gatherer ancestry, while Southern Germans show a stronger influence from early farmers. The steppe ancestry, however, is present throughout Germany, shaping not only physical traits but also aspects of language and culture that persist even today. This was just the beginning of the story. Over the centuries, waves of migrations, conquests, and cultural exchanges would continue to shape the German genetic landscape. From the rise of the first civilizations to the age of empires, the DNA of the German people would undergo even more transformations. But even as history moved forward, the genetic foundation laid down by these three ancient groups remained, providing a unique and fascinating insight into what makes German DNA so distinct. Ancient Germany was a land of constant change, shaped by cultures that rose, fell, and merged over thousands of years. Each civilization that called this region home left behind clues in the DNA of modern Germans, forming a genetic mosaic that reflects the movements of entire peoples. The genetic foundation of Germany was not built in a single era. It evolved over millennia, influenced by migrations, innovations, and the blending of different ancestral groups. One of the earliest cultures to leave a lasting mark was the Corded Ware culture, which flourished between 3000 and 2350 BC. These people were among the first to introduce the steppe ancestry from the Yemnaya, bringing with them new technologies, burial traditions, and social structures. Their name comes from the distinctive cord-like patterns found on their pottery, but their influence stretched far beyond ceramics. The Corded Ware people were highly mobile, relying on cattle herding and the use of wagons, which allowed them to spread across Central Europe rapidly. Their genetic contribution was significant, with the male lineage commonly carrying the R1a and R1b haplogroups, markers that remain prevalent in Germany today. The presence of these steppe-related genes introduced traits such as lighter skin, increased height, and even the ability to digest dairy, an adaptation that would become widespread in Northern Europe. Following the Corded Ware culture, another major cultural shift occurred with the emergence of the Beaker culture around 2800 BC. These people, named after their distinctive bell-shaped pottery, played a crucial role in expanding steppe ancestry further into Central and Western Europe. While their origins are debated, genetic studies suggest that the Beaker people were a mix of local Neolithic populations and newly arrived steppe pastoralists. They were known for their advancements in metalworking, particularly in copper and bronze, which helped drive the transition from the late Neolithic into the Bronze Age. Their expansion introduced even more genetic diversity, bringing a higher frequency of lighter eye and hair colors. By this time, Germany had become a melting pot of different ancestral influences, blending hunter-gatherer, Neolithic farming, and steppe-related genetics. As civilization in Germany progressed, the Unauthorized culture emerged around 2300 BC, marking the region's first true Bronze Age society. The Unauthorized people were skilled traders and metallurgists, crafting weapons, jewelry, and tools that connected them to broader European trade networks. Unlike the more mobile steppe cultures before them, they established more permanent settlements, leading to the development of early social hierarchies. DNA evidence shows that their genetic profile was a continuation of the earlier steppe influence but with additional genetic input from other parts of Europe as trade and migration brought new lineages into the mix. The Unauthorized culture laid the groundwork for future Germanic societies, establishing some of the first organized communities that would later evolve into powerful tribes and kingdoms. Throughout these periods, the genetic foundation of Germany continued to diversify. Different waves of migration layered new genetic influences over the existing ones, leading to the rich complexity seen in modern German DNA. From the hunter-gatherers who first roamed the land to the farmers who cultivated it and the steppe warriors who transformed it, each group left behind traces of their ancestry. These ancient populations did not disappear. They became part of the evolving genetic identity of Germany. As history moved forward, these early foundations would set the stage for the next great transformation. With the rise of the Germanic tribes and the collapse of the Roman Empire, a new era of migration and cultural blending would begin. The ancient bedrock of German DNA had been laid, but the genetic journey was far from over. As the ancient foundations of German DNA were set, the land that would become Germany became the heartland of some of history's most influential tribal groups. These Germanic tribes, such as the Goths, Franks, Saxons, Vandals, and Lombards, emerged from the forests and river valleys of northern and central Europe, each carrying a distinct genetic legacy. Their movements, conquests, and interactions with the collapsing Roman Empire would reshape the genetic landscape of Europe and spread their DNA far beyond the borders of modern Germany. During the migration period, between the 3rd and 8th centuries AD, the Germanic tribes expanded in all directions, filling the power vacuum left by the decline of Rome. Some, like the Visigoths and Ostrogoths, moved into Spain and Italy, while others, such as the Vandals, went as far as North Africa. But despite their cultural and political differences, these tribes shared common genetic markers. Studies on ancient remains confirm that many of these groups carried the I1, R1b U106, and R1a haplogroups, genetic signatures that indicate their deep roots in the early Germanic world. The I1 haplogroup, in particular, is a strong link to their Scandinavian origins, reflecting the migrations of northern tribes into what is now Germany. One of the most important tribes, the Franks, would go on to have a profound impact on the genetic history of Western Europe. Originating from the regions along the Lower Rhine, the Franks expanded into modern France and Belgium, blending with local populations but maintaining their Germanic lineage. The most common Y-DNA marker among the Franks was R1b U106, a subclade of R1b associated specifically with Germanic peoples. This lineage became a defining genetic trait in areas that the Franks settled, particularly in Western Germany, the Netherlands, and northeastern France. Even today, the descendants of the Franks carry a distinct genetic signature that connects them to their ancient tribal ancestors. The Goths, another major Germanic people, followed a different path. Originally from Scandinavia, the Goths migrated southward, establishing powerful kingdoms in Eastern and Southern Europe. Recent genetic studies support this Scandinavian origin, revealing that early Gothic remains contain high levels of the I1 haplogroup, which was dominant in ancient Scandinavia. As the Goths moved into the lands of modern Ukraine and Romania, they mixed with local populations, adding a layer of Eastern European ancestry to their genetic profile. Despite this blending, they retained their distinct identity, and their expansion played a role in spreading Germanic genetics far beyond the borders of Germany. In England, the impact of Germanic DNA is particularly striking. With the fall of Roman Britain, the Anglo-Saxons, a combination of Saxons, Angles, and Jutes, migrated from northern Germany and Denmark into the British Isles. Studies of early medieval English DNA reveal a sudden increase in genetic markers associated with these Germanic tribes. The Anglo-Saxons brought with them the same I1, R1b U106, and R1a markers seen among other Germanic groups, reinforcing the strong genetic ties between England and Germany. Even the English language itself, a Germanic tongue, is a lasting legacy of this migration. The collapse of the Western Roman Empire and the movements of the Germanic tribes also brought about significant cultural shifts. In southern Germany, particularly in Bavaria, the integration of these tribes with the remnants of Roman rule created a unique genetic mix, combining Germanic, Roman, and even Celtic influences. Meanwhile, in eastern Germany, the arrival of Slavic tribes introduced new genetic elements, adding further diversity to the region. This mixing of populations created distinct regional variations in German DNA, which are still visible in genetic studies today. As the migration period came to an end, these Germanic tribes had left their mark across the continent. Their DNA, carried through generations, helped shape the populations of modern Germany, England, France, and beyond. But Germany's genetic history was far from settled. With the rise of the Holy Roman Empire and the shifting borders of medieval Europe, new influences would continue to shape the country's DNA. As the dust settled from the great migrations of the Germanic tribes, a new force began to shape the genetic and cultural landscape of Central Europe, the Holy Roman Empire. Established in 800 AD under Charlemagne, this vast and complex empire was not a single unified nation but a loose collection of kingdoms, duchies, and principalities that stretched across what is now Germany, Austria, Switzerland, the Czech Republic, and parts of Italy and France. For over 1,000 years, the Holy Roman Empire played a key role in shaping the genetic diversity of Germany, as its shifting borders and constant wars brought together a mix of different ethnic groups, languages, and cultures. One of the most significant aspects of this era was the blending of Frankish, Roman, and indigenous Germanic DNA. The Franks, originally a Germanic tribe, had already expanded their influence across Western Europe, and under Charlemagne, they solidified their rule over what would become the Holy Roman Empire. Genetic studies of medieval burials in regions once controlled by the empire show a mixture of R1b U106, I1, and R1ay DNA haplogroups, reflecting the Germanic origins of the ruling elite. However, as the empire expanded southward, intermarriage with the Latin-speaking populations of Italy and the remnants of the old Roman world introduced Mediterranean haplogroups like J2 and E1b1b into the genetic pool. This influence was particularly strong in southern Germany, where Roman legacies endured in both culture and genetics. While the western regions of the empire remained heavily Germanic, the eastern frontier experienced an entirely different kind of genetic transformation. Throughout the early medieval period, Slavic migrations into what is now eastern Germany introduced a significant R1a presence into the region. Many of these Slavic groups, including the Sorbs and Wends, settled in areas like Brandenburg, Saxony, and Mecklenburg. Over time, these populations assimilated into the broader German identity, but their genetic influence remained. Even today, Eastern Germans show a higher percentage of R1a ancestry compared to Western and Southern Germans, a reminder of the medieval Slavic migrations. Another fascinating aspect of medieval Germany's genetic history is the presence of Jewish communities, particularly the Ashkenazi Jews. From the early medieval period onward, Jewish merchants, scholars, and craftsmen settled in cities along the Rhine, such as Mainz, Worms, and Speyer. Over centuries, these communities developed a distinct genetic and cultural identity, with a unique blend of Middle Eastern and European ancestry. Studies of Ashkenazi Jewish DNA reveal that while their maternal lineages are largely European, their paternal Y-DNA carries haplogroups such as J1 and J2, which trace back to the ancient Near East. These communities played a crucial role in the economic and intellectual life of the Holy Roman Empire, despite facing periodic persecution and forced migrations. As the centuries passed, the constant territorial conflicts of the Holy Roman Empire further shaped the genetic map of Germany. The empire's lack of centralized rule meant that different regions developed distinct identities and, by extension, unique genetic profiles. Bavaria, for example, retained strong Celtic and Roman influences, while northern Germany remained closely tied to its Scandinavian and Anglo-Saxon roots. The Rhineland, with its proximity to France and the Low Countries, became a genetic melting pot where Germanic, Frankish, and Romance-speaking populations mixed. Meanwhile, the Swiss regions of the empire developed in relative isolation, preserving some of the most ancient European genetic markers found in the Alps. By the time the Holy Roman Empire collapsed in 1806, its genetic legacy had already been firmly established. The diversity created by centuries of migration, warfare, and cultural exchange ensured that Germany would never have a single, uniform genetic identity. Instead, its people carried the DNA of Celts, Romans, Germanic tribes, Slavs, and even traders and scholars from the far reaches of the medieval world. But the fall of the empire was not the end of Germany's genetic transformation. In the centuries that followed, new migrations and historical upheavals would continue to shape the DNA of modern Germans, setting the stage for even greater changes in the years to come. As the Holy Roman Empire evolved, the northern regions of Germany remained distinct, shaped by a powerful maritime culture and deep genetic connections to Scandinavia. The North Sea and Baltic coasts were home to seafarers, traders, and warriors who would play a crucial role in shaping the genetic and cultural identity of Germany. From the legendary Viking raids to the rise of the Hanseatic League, northern Germany became a gateway between the Germanic world and the Nordic lands, leaving behind a genetic imprint that still exists today. One of the most defining genetic markers of northern Germany is the I1 haplogroup, which is closely associated with Norse and Viking ancestry. This Y-DNA lineage originated in Scandinavia and is still most common in countries like Sweden, Denmark, and Norway. However, genetic studies have shown that I1 also remains prevalent in northern Germany, particularly in coastal cities like Hamburg, Bremen, and Lübeck. This connection is no coincidence. Viking traders and raiders frequently interacted with Germanic tribes, settling in northern regions and contributing their DNA to the local population. Some of these Norse settlers eventually assimilated into German society, but their genetic legacy remains a testament to their influence. Beyond the Vikings, northern Germany was also shaped by the Hanseatic League, a powerful trading alliance that dominated the North and Baltic Seas from the 13th to the 17th century. This network of merchant cities, including Lübeck, Rostock, and Stralsund, brought extensive cultural and genetic exchange. As trade flourished, people from Scandinavia, the Netherlands, and even as far as Russia migrated to these cities, introducing new genetic influences. The result was a unique blend of North German, Scandinavian, and Baltic ancestry, creating a genetic profile distinct from other parts of Germany. One of the more unusual genetic discoveries in medieval northern Germany is the presence of artificially elongated skulls found in burial sites in Bavaria. These skulls, belonging mostly to women, suggest a form of cranial deformation that was common among certain nomadic groups from the east, such as the Huns. DNA analysis has revealed that some of these individuals carried East Asian genetic markers, hinting at possible intermarriage or cultural exchange between Germanic tribes and Eastern steppe peoples. While this practice eventually faded, it highlights the complex and sometimes unexpected influences on German DNA. Northern Germany also has a long history of interaction with Slavic populations, particularly in the eastern coastal regions. During the early medieval period, Slavic tribes such as the Arbitrites and Veleti settled in what is now Mecklenburg and Brandenburg, intermingling with the Germanic inhabitants. This led to a genetic blending of Germanic and Slavic lineages, with the R1A haplogroup becoming more common in these areas. Over time, these Slavic populations became part of the German identity, but their genetic contributions remain evident in the DNA of people from northeastern Germany. The genetic diversity of northern Germany is further reflected in its linguistic and cultural traditions. Unlike the High German dialect spoken in the south, the North developed its own language, known as Low German or Plattdeutsch, which shares similarities with Dutch and Scandinavian languages. This linguistic link is another indicator of the deep historical ties between northern Germany and its Nordic neighbors. Even today, surnames and place names in the region often have Scandinavian roots, a reminder of the centuries of cross-cultural exchange. While northern Germany maintained its connections to Scandinavia and the North Sea, the genetic influences of this region would eventually spread throughout the rest of Germany. Viking descendants, Hanseatic merchants, and Slavic settlers all played a role in shaping the broader German genetic landscape. As Germany moved into the modern era, these northern influences continued to blend with the genetic legacies of central and southern Germany, creating an even richer and more complex national identity. The story of northern Germany is a testament to the enduring power of migration, trade, and cultural exchange in shaping human genetics. Even though centuries have passed, the DNA of Vikings, merchants, and ancient Slavic tribes still lives on in the people of modern Germany, a reminder of a time when the North was a thriving crossroads of civilizations. Modern Germany is a country shaped by centuries of migration, conflict, and cultural exchange, and its DNA reflects this intricate history. While the foundations of German genetics were laid thousands of years ago by hunter-gatherers, farmers, and steppe pastoralists, the country's genetic landscape has continued to evolve through medieval expansions, royal dynasties, and, more recently, the dramatic population shifts of the 20th century. Today, Germany is one of the most genetically diverse countries in Europe, with regional variations that trace back to its complex past. One of the most fascinating aspects of modern German DNA is its regional diversity. In the north, genetic markers show a stronger connection to Scandinavia and the North Sea regions, reflecting the influence of Viking and North Germanic ancestry. Central Germany, often considered a genetic crossroads, has a balanced mix of Germanic, Slavic, and early European farming ancestry, due to its location at the heart of the continent. Bavaria and the southern regions, on the other hand, have retained stronger Celtic and Roman influences, along with a higher frequency of haplogroups common in southern Europe. This diversity highlights how Germany was never a single genetic entity but rather a collection of different peoples who gradually merged over time. The impact of war and border shifts has also played a major role in shaping Germany's modern genetic profile. During and after World War II, the forced displacement of millions of people caused significant genetic mixing across Central and Eastern Europe. Many ethnic Germans from regions like East Prussia, Silesia, and the Sudetenland were relocated into what is now Germany, bringing with them genetic influences from Poland, the Czech Republic, and Russia. At the same time, the division of Germany during the Cold War meant that East and West Germany experienced different migration patterns, with the East receiving a greater influence from Eastern European populations. Another major contributor to Germany's genetic diversity is immigration in the modern era. In the last few decades, Germany has welcomed large numbers of immigrants from Turkey, the Middle East, Africa, and other parts of Europe. This recent migration has added new layers to the genetic makeup of the country, making Germany one of the most ethnically diverse nations in Europe today. While these recent genetic additions are still relatively small compared to the older layers of German DNA, they are part of an ongoing process of cultural and genetic evolution. Advancements in DNA testing have allowed scientists to analyze the German genome in unprecedented detail. Studies using services like 23andMe and Ancestry DNA have revealed unexpected connections between modern Germans and ancient populations. Many Germans today carry genetic markers linking them to Celtic tribes, Roman settlers, and even far-reaching migrations from the Near East and Central Asia. These tests have also confirmed the long-standing presence of certain Y-DNA haplogroups, such as R1bu106, I1, and R1a, which have remained dominant throughout Germany's history. Perhaps the greatest revelation of modern genetic research is the realization that there is no singular German DNA. Instead, Germany's genetic diversity is a product of thousands of years of movement, adaptation, and survival. Whether tracing back to the hunter-gatherers who first set foot on European soil, the warriors of the steppe, or the traders of the medieval Hanseatic League, German DNA tells the story of a people who have continuously evolved through history. As science advances, new discoveries will continue to reshape our understanding of ancestry and identity. Germany's genetic legacy is still being written, and for those with German heritage, each DNA test provides another piece of the puzzle in uncovering where they come from. The journey of German DNA is far from over. Just like history itself, it is a story still unfolding.